Welcome to Fierce Conversations with Toby, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of overcoming. Here we share powerful stories that ignite healing and inspire profound transformations in your own journey. I'm Toby Dorr, and together we'll explore the resilience, courage, and fierce determination that turn life's challenges into stepping stones for growth. Let's begin this transformative journey together. Welcome back to Fierce Conversations with Toby. My guest today is Jackie Stuckey, who has a book out called Restoring the Southpaw, and she is a professional counselor. She's a published author and a passionate mental health advocate. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today with Jackie. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Toby.
It's my pleasure. We met in I try to remember how I meet everybody. So my publisher, I think, gave you my name to call. So, and I thought you were calling about something else, and I was going down a tangent, and they're like, well, I want to talk about your podcast. Like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yes, yep. She sent me an email just wanting to know what my publishing process was like.
Mm-hmm.
So I assumed it was just a mass email to all of her because she helped me publish my book.
Yeah.
Well, I saw your name and it said you had a podcast, and I thought, well, I'm really interested in doing it myself.
I think that is a perfect fit. So I'm so glad to have you here. Before we really get started into the real conversation, what's your favorite color and what do you think it says about you?
Well, I don't have a favorite color. I mean, when I was a teenager, I used to like the color blue, but now I just like bright colors. I just, I like the room to be nice and bright with just colors.
Yes, I can relate to that. I'm not much of a pastel person. I like those bold jewel tones.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty cool. So, Jackie, what's the hardest decision you've ever had to make?
Okay, I only get to choose one.
Well, or you can just choose the one you want to talk about, whatever comes to the top.
Well, so the first one that comes to mind is to quit drinking.
That's a tough one.
Yes, in my early 20s. So it was very difficult to do that. I had my children were small, they were toddlers. I wanted to stop, but I didn't know how because I was surrounded by, people who drank.
Yeah.
And nobody was interested in stopping, and I couldn't get advice from anybody. So it was really hard for me to make the decision. I wanted to because, there were days when, I always told myself, I'm going to stop. I binge the night before. I'm going to stop. But then I would always start drinking again.
That's a tough one to quit. And, there was alcoholism in my family with my grandfathers. And I had this unbelievable wisdom when I was in high school that I felt like if I started drinking, I would just be gone. And so I never drank. I just never picked up a drink. And, my husband today, and his mom was an alcoholic and was really big in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he tells me, he says, Toby, you're an alcoholic. You've just never drunk, but you're an alcoholic. And so I think, whatever steered me in that direction to know enough to not pick up a drink for one time was a blessing because that's a tough thing to get over.
It is.
It's probably one of the hardest things, I think, because it's so everywhere. People go out to a restaurant. No, just have a drink. Well, that just, it causes trouble when you're trying to quit. So
yeah, you're right.
It takes a lot of courage to do that and a lot of determination. So that's
and prayer.
Yes, absolutely. Prayer is a part of it all, I think.
Yes.
That was probably an answer to an unanswered prayer telling me in high school, don't pick that up. Don't even try it. So
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. I'm relieved because I had enough to deal with. I didn't have to add that to the mix.
Right.
So tell us about a significant event in your life that knocked you down and how did you pick yourself up?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to my younger years when I was
Mhm.
18, and my life was very chaotic, and I dropped out of high school. Well, I flunked out because I was skipping school.
Uh-huh.
I was pretty smart, but I just, family life was troubled, and
Mhm.
so I had a hard time, uh, going on, moving on with my life and everything. And so I was in a domestic violence situation.
Mm.
So I'm a survivor, and that was really hard to deal with. So I was in two situations. I married two men who were, violent, and so
Mhm.
and not only that, they were addicts. The second husband was an addict, and it kept setting me back. Every time he would use, he would run away from the house. He would steal from the house, steal from me.
Wow.
And I was working on my undergraduate at the time, and so it's very difficult to go to school when you don't know where your husband is, or if he's dead or alive, or
Right.
uh,
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things I love about the difficult journeys is because it's really where you build a character. And if you just have a perfect life with nothing to worry about, I
mhm,
mean, you really don't come out that strong of a person.
right,
So
yes.
I think all that I can't imagine having young kids and having to worry about your husband when you're trying to worry about yourself and go to school. That's a lot, takes a lot of commitment.
That's true, and at the time, I was going through when I stopped drinking at the age of 25, so I started developing mental health issues
Mhm.
because of it. So I was dealing with my mental health issues while trying to raise my children, while trying to be in a marriage, and it was very difficult when you are agoraphobic and
Wow.
you can't go outside and you can't be alone, and so that transformation was extremely difficult for me.
So how did you find your way through that?
Well, the first husband that I had, although we had no business being together, I needed him at the time.
Mhm.
He helped a lot. He was there taking care of the kids, and he's not the father of my children, but he was there to help me whenever I would have a panic attack, like
Mhm.
totally freaking out. He was there to go to the grocery store with me, to help out when I couldn't,
Mhm.
because I was having all these different types of phobias that emerged, and I didn't know what was happening to me. So it was a crazy time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds very chaotic.
It was. It,
Yeah.
but I was determined to reach my goals. I was working on my GED at the time,
Mhm.
and so it was very difficult when you can't go outside and you know.
So how did you find your way through that trauma to to create something positive? What was it that kept you reaching for that?
Well, determination and prayer, because it was God who heard my cry when I was
Mhm.
drinking and down. I didn't know how to stop. No earthly measures could help me. I mean, my limitations couldn't. So I remember praying one night. Actually, it was one day, for God to take my life because
Yeah.
I just couldn't continue on that way.
Mhm.
But once I moved from Indiana here with all my mental health issues, I found a therapist.
Ah, and that's a game changer.
Yes, and
Mhm.
she used exposure therapy to help me. Uh,
I haven't heard about that. What is that? Exposure therapy.
well, the very things that I was afraid of, she exposed me to,
Mm.
a little bit at a time. I couldn't
Uh-huh.
go outside. I couldn't catch the city bus alone because I didn't have a vehicle. I couldn't
Oh,
be alone. So she gave me homework assignments.
wow.
Yeah, I want you to take the bus, and I want you to take the bus to my office.
Wow.
And by that time, during my treatment, we had acquired a car, and she said, "Don't have your husband drive you. I want you to take the bus to come and see me." Well, right then and there, I decided therapy is not for me. I'm never coming back. I cannot do this, but
Uh-huh.
I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can't really get through something unless you face it head on and go through it.
That's true. That is true.
But she gave you a safe environment in which to do it.
He
So
did it.
you didn't have to just step out there and think, I'm just going to do this. she told you to do it and you trusted her. So you had to believe that she knew that you could do it
Yeah, she
and that
believes
you had a purpose for it because you were coming to see her.
true.
So,
That's
yeah.
true. He had more faith than I did. That's for sure.
Counselors just are miracle workers as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I spent a lot of years, a lot of time in therapy and it changed my life.
Right.
It just made me not afraid anymore.
Right. It's
And
helpful
that's
if
pretty
you use it,
powerful.
if you want it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's been your most important mentor?
There have been a lot. Um, I
You can tell
guess
us
I could.
about more than one if you want.
Okay. So mentor. So let's see. When I was in school, working on my undergraduate, there were professors, advisors, to help me along the way. One in particular, his name is Dr. Nelson. He helped me get started with my book as an independent study. I took a class
Oh.
in the study, and he was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, because I'm like, "Do you have any homework for me?" He's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm writing a book. I need some guidance." And so he helped me, hone in on the direction that because I was all over the place.
Yes, yes, I can relate to that.
Yes.
And I especially, I think your book is a lot like mine. It's really personal and talks about some difficult things. And when you're writing about them, you tend to get lost back in them again and you need someone to kind of say, "No, let's go this way," or let's,
Right.
you can
Yeah.
leave that alone now because you've
Right.
already done that. And it's pretty helpful to have someone. I love the idea of putting a book in your independent study classes. That's a great hot topic because I think everybody has a story to tell.
Yes.
And telling that story is healing, but it also sharing that story with other people can extend grace to them as well so that they believe they can heal too.
Right. You're right. You're right.
It's pretty
Maybe
powerful.
for some spiritual, like when I'm going to church, the pastor and the first lady, they were our mentors,
Mhm.
and that's what really helped me develop spiritually and as a whole person because, I was going through marital problems at the time,
Mhm.
mental issues still. And so they really helped guide not only me, but, the congregation as a whole.
Yeah, I love that. I
Hmm.
love that. And I think, you know, finding a church that works for you when you're going through something traumatic gives you that community that you really need. You've got to have a community surrounding you that helps lift you up on the days when you're down.
Right. That's true.
I found that when I was in prison, the women I was in prison with, we were all at our lowest point. But on any given day, one of us would be lower than the rest. And we could lift them up and we could relate because we're all stuck there together.
Yeah.
And then on another day, I might be the one who was able to lift someone else up because nobody could relate to what we were going through unless you were going through it.
Right.
So
Was
it
that
was pretty
lonely
hard.
existence? Was that a lonely existence for you in the beginning?
It was, I was the oldest of seven children. And we were a busy family and we were loud, and even my husband, my current husband, when he went to our first family event, he was an only child. He's like, "How can you guys function? Everybody's talking and there's like five conversations going on in the same room. And you're in this one conversation and you're talking, and all of a sudden you'll stop and you'll interject something into another conversation. And how can you deal with all that?" And so I was never in a situation in my life where I was alone until I went to prison. And it I didn't think I could do it. And then I found out that I loved it. I loved just being with myself because I could listen to my own thoughts and I could, figure out who I was. And it was so powerful. I eventually came to think that, you know, I found my freedom behind bars. And it was just because I had the time to get to know me. And it was a blessing. I'm not going back. Don't want to do it again.
Right.
Hardest thing I've ever done. But it
Yes.
was a blessing. It truly was a blessing.
Yes. Yep. I understand that. I understand blessings in disguise.
Yes. And so many of the best blessings come in disguise.
Mhm.
You know, you think you're facing one thing and you end up in this whole different direction that you never would have got to if you hadn't had that obstacle in your way.
That is true.
I love that. So, what's a turning point in your life that propelled you in a different direction? You thought you were headed one way and then all of a sudden, zoop, off you were in another path.
Um, well, let's see. I guess when I got into graduate school,
Mhm.
I had applied to one university and I didn't get in because one of my letters of recommendation didn't make it before the cutoff time.
Ah,
And I tried and tried and tried. And then someone told me about an MSW degree, and I thought that's what I wanted to do, social work. So there,
uh-huh.
you go to this university over here. So as I talked to the enrollment specialist, and it's a Christian university, Colorado
Mhm.
Christian University,
Okay.
um, she made me feel so welcome, so at ease. And I ended up getting into the counseling program because I wanted to be a counselor. Um, but then I was torn. I thought, am I going to be able to use this anywhere? But that was my passion. I wanted to be a counselor. I wanted to give back. And so because she made the enrollment process so comfortable for me, it seemed like God just opened up the doors for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You
applied.
know, I love it when you're doing work that doesn't even feel like work because I'd be doing this anyway if I was just sitting around because I love it so much.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was a turning point for me when I got into graduate school. It seemed like whereas the other university was giving me such a hard time, I had to take all these stupid tests like the GRE and
Mhm.
the
Yes.
Miller's analogies test. Those
Uh-huh.
don't mean anything. And then I go over to this Christian university and I apply, I get interviewed, and I get accepted.
Yeah. Yeah, because they wanted to get to know you as a person. They didn't care about how well you did on a test. And some people just don't do well on tests.
No,
And if you exclude someone because of a poor test score, you might have excluded Einstein. I bet he didn't do great on tests either. So,
exactly. You want to hear something interesting? I
yeah.
was at one point enrolled at the vocational rehab place here.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I was still, I had gotten my bachelor's degree and I was trying to find the funding to go get my master's, right?
Mhm.
So they were like, well, you don't need a master's to counsel people. And plus, this is what they said, you don't have the ability to succeed in a master's program, in a graduate program. That's what they told me.
Uh, wow.
Yes. And I thought, wow.
Yeah.
So the turning point was when I was accepted, and it was one of the best experiences, attending my cohort, in my master's program, and also now working with clients, helping
I
them on the way.
love going to school. It is one of my favorite things to do, and I keep thinking I'm gonna check and see if some universities in some states offer free classes when you get to a certain age, and I think I might just check it out and take something. I just love to go to school, and, when I met my husband, I had 2 bachelor's degrees, and he would go places and introduce us, and he'd say, "This is my wife, she's the educated one." And I got so tired of hearing that, and so one day I went on the computer and I filled out a FAFSA form for him, and I told him, "You are enrolled at the community college, just go pick out the classes you wanna take." He's like, "What?" I said, "You're going to college too." And he said, "Okay." So he went and he got his bachelor's degree. And while he was going to school, I thought, I miss school. He's doing all this homework and projects. So I enrolled in a master's degree program. And then he got his bachelor's degree and he started saying, "This is my wife. She's the really educated one. She's got a master's degree." And so I said, "Chris, guess what? You're going to get a master's degree." And he did. And he's like, I guess he's learned not to tell me what he isn't anymore.
But that's great, though. You two can talk education, how.
Yes, yes, yes. I just love it. And, I'm working on putting together some courses to help women with some foundational development type stuff. And I love school so much that it's so exciting to me to be able to put a course together. I really am looking forward to that.
Well, good luck with that. I would love to
Thank
hear how
you.
that works out.
Yes, I'll definitely keep you in the loop because I'm really excited about it. So, has there ever been a time in your life when you felt imprisoned? And what did you do to break free?
Yes, growing up, um, dealing with lots of trauma,
Mhm.
and I was raised in a culture where you didn't tell about the bad things. Like,
Yes.
never
Mhm.
understand that way of thinking. I mean, I understand it. You know what I mean? I understand.
Yes.
It's like, keep what goes on in this house.
In this house, yeah.
And then if you talk to the elders back then, they're like, well, your parents are doing the best they can, sort of thing, and don't say anything. So I felt like, where do you go? Where do you go for help?
Yeah.
How do I evolve? How do I
Mhm.
break free from whatever this dysfunction is? How do I
Yeah. I think it's kind of a generational curse. It's what your parents were raised in and their parents before them, and there has to be somebody in that cycle that breaks free and says, "I'm gonna do this different," and kinda breaks out of that whatever's kept people locked because it is generational. If your
Mhm.
family's poor or uneducated and you're born into the family, and it takes a lot for you to break free and not be poor and uneducated because the role models you have aren't that.
That's true. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's very true. And when I wanted to write my book, of course, I had to expose certain unpleasantries
Yes.
like abuse and
Mhm.
alcoholism and incarceration. I mean, those things, like, no, that's not normal.
Yeah.
People shouldn't experience those things in their life. I had some backlash, not so much backlash. My oldest brother, when I wrote the first chapter and I let him read it and I was talking about our parents, I think he felt the type of way about it.
Mhm.
I don't think he wanted me to talk about it, but it was my story.
Uh-huh.
Like, I was compelled to tell my
Yeah.
story my way.
Mhm. You
So
know, and I think talking about it is where the healing starts,
mhm,
because if you can't talk about it, well, you can't heal from it because you can't even acknowledge it to know you need to heal from it.
that is true. That is I see so often with my clients that, this thing called shame,
Oh, yes.
victims of sexual abuse or physical abuse, for some reason, they internalize that and they take ownership of the perpetrator's
Yeah.
garbage and they carry that with them.
Yeah.
It's not their burdens to carry.
That's right.
But you see, that's
Very
how shame operates. It
Mhm.
hides in the dark and it tells you can't talk to anybody about these things, but you can. And once you start talking about shame, when you expose it, but of course, you have to have a safe space to do that,
Yes, you do.
then, as you said, the healing can begin.
Mhm. One of the courses that I teach is called Slaying Your Shame Dragon. And
Oh,
I really think as women, we take on so much shame that really isn't even ours to take on.
yes, yep,
And my story was so high profile, and I was on the news and on the newspapers all the time. And of course, when somebody does something wrong, when they've slipped and really gone off out of the realm of normalness,
right.
the media loves to grab it and tear into it and just make it as salacious as possible.
Mhm.
And so when I saw myself in those news stories or in those newspaper headlines, I couldn't love that person because that was really a messed up person. And
Right.
so I couldn't deal with that shame because I couldn't grab hold of it. I couldn't, it was just so cloudy. It just what didn't have a form. And so I started imagining shame as this dragon with these gnarly teeth and this nasty breath and this spiked tail when you think you're going along just fine, that tail swings and hits you in the chest and knocks you
Yeah,
off track again.
yes,
And
yes.
when I saw that shame as a dragon, then I could see myself with a sword slaying that dragon.
Right, exactly.
And that's what I had to do to, move on past it. And I've learned since that, I thought, oh, great, I've done this. I've let go of that shame. But then every once in a while, I'll get a comment on a social media that really hurts, really gets to the core of my woundedness. And I start to go, oh, I really am a terrible person. And then I go, nope, stop, get away. And I have to go back and slay the shame dragon all over again.
You
But
do. Yes. Yes. I like that.
yeah, it just really made it physical for me and substantial and with form, something that I could see and push. And it made all the difference in the world.
Right. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
And more women need to hear what you just,
Yes.
they need to,
Yeah.
they need to hear that because, there's so many guilt-ridden, shame-riddled people out there that they're just
Women can
carrying
believe
these
that it's their
burdens and they don't
fault
know how to
they
heal
got
from
hit,
these things.
or it's their fault that they, you know, can't cook or whatever it is. But it's not. And it's not even true. It's just what someone tells you because they've got their own issues to deal with. And so they reach out to make you feel bad so that they can feel better.
Right.
And it
So
really has nothing to do with you.
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You said every once in a while you'll see a comment on social media that
Mhm.
it hurts.
Yeah.
Like, like, does that still hurt? What do you do to,
It still hurts, I've gotten so much better at it. So, like, recently I got someone commented on my book on a post I put out there, and they said, "This is a tremendous story. This woman had so much bravery and courage to face, whatever." And then somebody replied and said, "I don't understand what you see because what I see is a woman who embarrassed her husband and her sons and was a spoiled brat and did something that would make her feel better." And and I started to think, "Oh gosh." But then my thought immediately was, and this is how I know I'm really coming through it. I said, "I'm so sorry for you, whoever you are that wrote this, because you're hurting. And that's not a place I want to be." And I could just let go of it. But it's taken a while to get there.
Yes. Redemption is the theme of redemption is lacking in many respects.
It certainly is.
Uh, um, condemnation was always the thing. Like that lady said, she didn't understand. Okay, well, as long as you're in this human body, you're going to make mistakes. You're not perfect.
Yes. Yes. And I really think social media has brought out the worst in all of us because people will say things without thinking what they're saying. They'll say things that they would never say to a person in face to face. And
Right?
it's just given us a tool to be bitter and petty
Mean
and
and
not think
vicious
about it. Yes. Yes.
and
Horribly
unaccountable.
vicious. Hmm. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I just drives me crazy. People go out and they take their camera and they try to find places where people are out of control and they call them Karens and put it on and it's like, what about all the beautiful women whose name is Karen? What are you doing here? And
Yeah.
why do I want to watch this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just something needs to change. So I like
Right.
that. Yeah. So
Right.
what's one question you wish I'd asked you? Something you'd like to share that we haven't even touched on?
Let's see. I don't know. Um, Maybe about more things. Well, maybe one thing about my book. One of the things that I talk about, the theme in my book, the theme of hope.
I love that. Hope's such a powerful word.
Yes. So that's the message that I wanted to convey throughout my book. That though you may be going through trials and tribulations in your life, if you have goals you're trying to attain, you can
Mhm.
do it. Because
Yeah.
if I can do it, and I sorely lack the resources, and the wherewithal, the mental capacity to do these things, people, who possess, seemingly possessing more resources can achieve their goals as well. And they shouldn't be afraid to talk about the tough, scary,
Yeah.
unpleasant issues. And, to me, like I said, incarceration, I was the wife of 2 inmates.
Mm-hmm.
I was incarcerated myself for like 8 days,
Mm-hmm.
20s, because I lost custody of my children when they were toddlers.
Uh,
And so mental health issues, when you're going through it, being abused by your significant other, we need to talk about those things. We need
we
to.
do need to talk about them because they shouldn't be hidden. Because when they are hidden, it's just like, not taking care of a wound. Then it festers and gets infected and it spreads. But
Right.
you have to bring them out into the open and
True.
talk about them to
Right.
move past them.
Right. That's true. And I don't like the fact that I think I asked you in our previous phone conversation about whether people have said your book was dark.
Right,
And
right.
Mine,
Did ask me that.
mine was described as kind of dark. You know what I mean? But it's
Mhm.
not dark. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I'm
Well,
saying?
it's not dark if it's filled with hope.
Right.
People
I,
just have to see the hope. They have to open their eyes to the light and to the silver linings in a story.
and they
Yeah.
have to open their eyes to the very issues that are very real in front of them.
Yes, because they are true. They are out there.
That's
You can
right.
look anywhere in any city and you're going to find all that.
That
And
is
if you keep it hidden, then children grow up in homes where they feel like they can't talk about their home life like you had.
right.
And it just doesn't prepare them to break free as an adult and go out into the world and make a difference.
And what does that say about the perpetrators if we are silenced?
Yes.
You know,
It lets them get away with it.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty powerful. I haven't read your book yet, but I'm going to.
Mm.
And I'm looking here at your author bio, and I see that you learned American Sign Language and are an instructor and an interpreter. And I think that's beautiful.
Thank you. I don't do it so much anymore. I do have a deaf sister. I had a deaf cousin. She passed away.
Uh,
But my arthritis,
yes, that would be hard.
oh my goodness, made it so difficult.
I have trouble doing anything with my hands, but
Really.
when I had the prison dog program, I had a volunteer who was deaf. And so I learned enough sign language to communicate with her.
Mhm.
And I just thought it was so cool. And my oldest son is hearing impaired. He's worn hearing aids his whole life. He never did learn sign language, but he read lips. But I just think that the deaf community is just beautiful. And I think they're so aware of things. And Gallaudet universities, we live outside of DC and we've driven up there on the campus, just to be there because I think there's something really special about deaf people. I don't know what it is, but I think they have well, when you're not distracted by everything going on around you, all this stuff bombarding you, maybe you notice things that we don't pay attention to because there's just too much sound to distract us.
Right.
I
Well,
but
it's a beautiful language.
yes, it is.
So beautiful. And
And I love how everything you watch on TV now, they've got interpreters, and I just think that's so beautiful. When I was a girl, a friend of our family's was my same age, and she was deaf. And we played with her, and I don't know how we communicated. She didn't do sign language. Maybe she learned it later, but she was so isolated. Some of the things that we'd take her and go do, and she just was, what is this? And I think her parents, because she was deaf, they really sheltered her and protected her. And
right.
they didn't let her out into the world to experience it. And it I don't know, it just seems sad, I think, how sometimes they're just cut off from so many things. And
Right.
sign language really gave them that avenue to get back involved and
Yes. Yes. No, it's interesting that you said that because my sister has been basically adopted into our family. They were neighbors across the street from us.
Uh-huh.
She lived with her mom and her grandmother and her aunt. And she, of course, she lost her hearing at the age of 3.
Mm.
And that's when she went to the school for the deaf and blind. But when she's around us, when deaf people are around hearing people, they don't speak their language because we don't
Right.
know it. And so she
Yeah.
create home signs.
Uh-huh.
makeup signs so that she can read lips.
Yeah.
So yeah, and if you learn their language, wow, they love you, because they
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time
Mhm.
get to know them.
I think it's beautiful, and I really think, you know, maybe we should be teaching it in our grade schools. I think people should know it. It shouldn't be
Mhm.
like a wonder to find someone that can communicate with the deaf because they're everywhere. They're around us and they shouldn't be so cut off.
Yes, just like Spanish is a requirement in high school,
Yes.
I guess, American Sign Language should be too.
Mhm. I think it should. Really think it should. And I think the kids would love it. So we live with our grandkids here. They live upstairs. We live down in the walkout basement. And I think I'm going to start working with that with my grandkids. And I
Yes.
think we need to learn that. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
my
that's beautiful.
kids found my granddaughter, she's 7. So she found one of my sign language books in my bookshelf here,
Mhm.
last and so so they were interested. "Grandma, what are these signs? I mean, what are they saying? What are they doing with their hands?" So
Yeah.
I would teach them.
Mhm.
I'm gonna teach them
Yeah.
how
I think that's beautiful. I think that's just beautiful. Have you ever, by chance, counseled someone who's deaf?
I have, yes. I had one client, I started counseling with him, and then I got COVID.
Oh,
Whoops.
yeah.
And so, I just could not,
Because, when I sit and think about it, there's so many services they are cut off from. Because I bet it's hard to find a counselor that can sign.
right.
It just yeah, I do think we should integrate that a lot more into our society.
Yep. They definitely need
Mhm.
counseling, that's for
I
sure.
love that. I really love that. So, what's one question you'd like to ask me?
Okay. Hmm, I think I've asked the questions. Oh,
Yeah, we had
I don't
talked for
we
quite a
talked
bit.
about how did you meet your husband?
Oh, it was so funny. When I got out of prison, I lived in Kansas City, and my crime, everybody knew me. I'd go in a restaurant to eat, and they'd all be pointing at me. Kansas City is a big town where everybody knows everybody, so everybody knows your business. And so I took a job in Boston, and this guy hired me to build a website for him, and I moved to Boston, and I was excited. I'd lived my whole life in Kansas City. I'd never left town. And I went to Boston, and my first day on the job, I was sitting at a desk, and there was 2 desks facing each other, and sitting across from me was Chris. And Chris was just talking, and he said, "Oh, they were doing they took in historic buildings in Boston, they were turning them into high-end condos." So
Mhm.
Chris did a lot of he was a construction supervisor, and one of their workers was from El Salvador, and he had gotten picked up in Maine for public intoxication or something, and he was in jail, and Chris said he was just talking out loud, he said, "Oh, I really need to write to" um, can't even remember his name. I'll call him George. "I really need to write to George and see what it's gonna take to get him out of jail." And I said, "Well, if you're gonna write to him and he's in jail, you need to know his inmate number because he might not get his mail if you don't know his inmate number." And he said, "Now, how do you know that?" And I thought, well, here it is. I can say, I don't know, or I can just own it. And so I just said, well, I did some time. And that's all I said. And he said, oh, okay. And he went on. We finished our day. And the next day I came in the office and I sat down and he walked in and he said, we need to talk. I did a Google search on you last night. And he just loves my story. And we'll be on a train and he'll say, "This is my wife. She's a felon. She was on America's Most Wanted," and I'm like, "Oh, God." So with him around, I've had to really embrace my story because he's embraced it and he's proud of it. Proud that what I went through and how I came out. And so he has really lifted me up and encouraged me to be proud of it too.
Was it difficult for you to embrace love again?
It was so difficult. I had no intentions of it. I'd gotten out of a marriage that didn't work for me and took me 28 years to get out of. I'd gone on this whirlwind, wild, crazy 12-day on the run car and ended in a car chase with this guy that I helped escape from prison. And I thought, I don't need any men in my life at all. And God just kept throwing Chris and I together, like our desks face each other. And then, something else happened and we'd be thrown together in a way that we couldn't separate. And then he got thrown out of where he was living, and he was living in this unheated camper way away. And I went and got him and brought him back. And I said, "It's Thanksgiving week, Chris. I have 2 beds in my apartment. Come back, take a shower, do your laundry. I'll fix this Thanksgiving dinner." And then he got sick and couldn't leave. Every time we tried to pull apart, something would happen that would force us to stay. And so after about a year, we just got married. And I think there you are. And we really learned how to be in each other's space before we ever considered being a couple. And so we built this great foundation where we supported each other and knew each other really, really well. And then by the time we did get married, it's just been awesome. Chris just is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I know I'm the best thing that's ever happened to him. And together we can change the world.
Wow.
So I
love that story.
Yeah. We could
Totally
not
awesome.
get married. Yeah. God wasn't going to let it happen that we didn't get together. So,
Right.
and the funny thing is, Chris had been married before. I'd been married before too, but Chris had been married before, and he was crazy in love with his wife, and he never got over their divorce, but it was a really dysfunctional marriage.
Yeah.
And for 13 years, Chris cried. And he's like, "I'm never going to find anybody." And he'd tell his mom, "There's no one out there for me. I'm never going to find anybody." And his mom she was a really wise person and a really spiritual person. And she said, "Chris, there is someone out there for you, but you need to give her time because you don't know what God's putting her through to prepare her for you." And so I always say the reason I went to prison was because Chris, he prayed for it. It had nothing to do with me. It was Chris's fault.
That's still an amazing story. And talk about divine intervention.
It really is. It truly is a story.
I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, thank you. And it really is good.
Hey,
what?
Maybe there's hope for me one day.
Yes, I think there is. And, Chris and I always say, in our instance, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It's more like 11, because together we just lift each other up and push each other out, and we accomplish so much more because we support each other that strongly.
Great.
Yeah.
That's
just love it. It is beautiful. But Chris is one of a kind. So what's one word that inspires you?
I'm sorry?
What's one word that inspires you?
Perseverance.
Oh, that's a great word. Yeah. Never quit. Just keep going.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a pretty strong word. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for being on with us today. It's been my pleasure, and I can't wait to share your episode with the world.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Fierce Conversations with Toby. Your support means the world, and I hope today's episode made a positive impact on you. To keep our conversations going, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. A 5-star rating, like, comment, or review helps tremendously in spreading our message. You can also support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/fierceconversations. All members receive a downloadable gratitude journal and access to a private Facebook group. Plus, 10% of your subscription goes directly to donating my workbooks to women in prison. Finally, sharing this episode with your friends and family is a great way to amplify our mission. Fierce Conversations is created and hosted by me, Toby Dorr, with production by Number 3 Productions. The theme music, Grooving, composed by Lisa Plass, features Lisa on flute, Carolyn Parody on piano, and Tony Ventura on bass. Learn more at tobydor.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, escape your prison.